You know, I suppose you're sitting on Mars and you're watching it. The U.S. is telling Iran to give up arms and terror. I mean, does Iran have 800 military bases around the world? You know, does Iran produce half of the world's armament? I mean, is Iran a country that blocks Security Council resolutions to regulate arms trade? Is Iran a country that has to abandon aggression? The U.S. in fact invaded and occupies two countries right next door to Iran. Does Iran occupy Canada and Mexico? When was the last time Iran committed aggression? You know? But this passes without comment. It tells us a lot about ourselves. You know, people like us. We sit there and watch this and don't collapse in ridicule. In fact, it's applauded. Obama's so much more forthcoming than Bush. Wonderful. Well, that's the kind of thing that happens constantly. It's just, what are the prospects actually for the Palestinians? There's basically two. One is that the United States will join the world. It will accept the international consensus. If it agrees to a two-state settlement, stops supporting Israel's violation of international law in the occupied territories, Israel will go along. And they basically have no choice. Once they decided to abandon security in favor of expansion, they have to do what the U.S. says. So they would withdraw. It's sometimes claimed that they couldn't because it would lead to a civil war. That's not true. I mean, it's partly true. Like if the Israeli army tried to eliminate the settlers by force, it would probably lead to a civil war because of the religious nationalist elements in the officer corps and so on. But there's absolutely no need for the Israeli army to withdraw any settlers. It would be sufficient for the government of Israel to announce that on such and such a day the army returns to Israel, and then provide trucks and buses, and the settlers who have been subsidized to live illegally in the occupied territories, would climb quietly into the buses and go quietly back into Israel, where they'd be subsidized there. Maybe a few would remain, a couple of religious Jews from Brooklyn, maybe, who decide to hang out and take a piece of the ride. Okay, they can do that. They want to live under Palestinian authority, their choice. They don't have to be removed. In fact, the withdrawal, the disengagement from Gaza could have been handled exactly the same way. There was what was called a national trauma. You sent in the army, they had to take the settlers out, screaming big pictures on the front pages of little boys pleading, "Don't take us away from our homes," cries of "never again," Auschwitz and so on. This is all staged, totally staged. It was staged so transparently that commentators in the Israeli press were just ridiculing it because it was totally unnecessary. They didn't have to remove a single settler. All they had to do was announce that on August 1st, the IDF, the army, will leave Gaza, and the settlers would have left, period. But then you wouldn't have had a national trauma, and you wouldn't have had a justification for increasing settlement in the West Bank, which was the whole point of the disengagement, and you wouldn't have the cries of "never again" and so on. But what made this even more ridiculous was that it was a repetition of a staged national trauma in 1982. In 1982, after Israel and the United States finally accepted Sadat's 1971 offer, Israel had to evacuate settlements of northeastern Sinai. So there was a staged trauma in which miraculously not a single settler was injured. In fact, the Israeli press, maybe you will remember, had headlines saying "National Trauma 1982" and making fun of it. Okay, it was just a repeat in 2005, and if they want to leave the West Bank, it'll be the same thing. So no civil war, no national trauma, just pull out and the settlers will follow you. If you help them by sending lawyers in the war. That's one possibility. The other possibility is convergence, or convergence plus. That is, the U.S. and Israel pursue the policies that they are now developing right in front of our eyes. They're not secret, they go on every day. Just carrying forward. Sometimes it's claimed that'll lead to an apartheid state. That's just not true. Israel will take what it wants. The Palestinians, those who remain, will be left somewhere in isolated cantons. In fact, the Israeli Tourist Bureau may even subsidize it because it's picturesque. If Israelis and American tourists drive past on the superhighways they're building, it'll be nice for the tourist guide to point to a Palestinian leading a goat up in the hills. It's kind of a biblical scene, kind of looks nice. So they may even subsidize. And the rest will rot. Like Dan said, live like dogs. If you want to leave, leave. There's no apartheid, no civil rights struggle, nothing. Just take what you want and let the others rot. That's the alternative. And it gets worse. There was an ultra-right position in Israel advanced by Avigdor Lieberman, who's now the foreign minister. Now, he announced this. This was described as neo-Nazi. The idea was to take parts of Israel that have a heavy Palestinian population. There's one particular area, Wadi Ara, which is in the Galilee, right near the Green Line. Take that area, force the population into Jordan, or into a Palestinian state, in fact. Force them into a derisory third world, barely existing Palestinian state, and then take over the parts of the West Bank that we want, which would solve the demographic problem of too many non-Jews in a Jewish state. Well, of course, the population is strongly opposed to it. You can read articles from the Washington Post by Israeli correspondent describing, they don't want to lose their citizenship in the country where they live, a rich first world country, and be kind of tossed into a barely surviving third world country. But they don't matter. We do what we want. It doesn't matter what people want. Now, when Lieberman proposed that, it was literally denounced as neo-Nazi. Now it's mainstream. It was accepted by Kadima. Tzipi Livni, who's the official dove, thought it was a good idea. Kissinger thought it was great. He said the only people who oppose this are those who want anarchy and so on. The New York Times thinks it's a great idea. The New York Times correspondent in Israel, Ethan Bronner, wrote a couple of weeks ago that Lieberman's proposal appeals to the left. The left likes it because he's calling for yielding areas that are now part of Israel in a land swap. Yielding areas. He didn't bother to tell us how they're yielding areas. They're going to yield areas where the population wants to stay where they are and have the limited rights they now have in a rich country,